So I'm going to make a really weird looking move. Knight h4. In order to attempt to distract the knight away from g6. White with a 17-18. All right. e4, c5. Well, y'all know what I'm doing. Smith-Morra. Accepted. Let's see if... Well, obviously. Yeah, accepted. Accepted. Yes. Okay, so we go knight f3. And e6, which is a pretty popular system. One of the better systems that black has. And those of you who have watched the previous speedruns and seen the Morra games know what the theoretical move here is, which is, in my opinion, very counterintuitive. I feel like your brain won't really tell you to play like this, but this move has some very deep ideas behind it. That is to develop the bishop to c4. Now, the reason you might not play it is because the bishop is just biting on granite, to use my favorite expression. But there are many cases where you sack a knight on d5, the pawn on e6 disappears, and then the bishop opens up. And there's other reasons you would put it on c4. I'll get into this later. Knight e7 is not the move as far as I know. Knight e7 is not the move as far as I know. But there is no direct way to punish. I mean, there's a couple of tempting moves that we could play. The d6 square, of course, is what we ultimately want to try to exploit. So we can play bishop out to f4, one idea, to try to put it on d6. We can play knight b5. But if we play knight b5, black could go d5, or black could go knight e7 to g6, and we're not in time to put our knight on d6. I mean, we can put our knight on d6, but it'll be captured. So in such situations, I feel like a lot of people spend a lot of time looking for something insane, but let's practice just being straightforward and castling. Let's just put this decision off. Knight g6. All right. So now I think it might be a good opportunity to test out, I call this the Mark Esserman move. So as I mentioned, the idea of putting the bishop on c4, I'm sure castles is not the best move, by the way, but still, I want to show you that playing simple chess can still be good. I think that in these positions, just throwing the knight onto d5 could be a pretty interesting idea. Probably not objectively sound, but let's see what happens. Let's see what happens if we just throw our knight onto d5. The reason I don't think this is very good is not because of oh, I think ED is a mistake. Oh, I don't think our opponent knows what's waiting for him. Uh-oh. Now maybe this is unsound, I don't know, but I want to have some fun. I want to have some fun. Now, this is not entirely a preposterous sacrifice, and you shouldn't, if you're thinking to yourself, this sacrifice is insane, I would never play like this, then you're doing something wrong, because you should understand sort of intuitively why the sacrifice actually has a chance of working, which is that black is completely undeveloped, and neither bishop is developed, so black isn't close to castling, and the other thing is that the e-file being wide open means that a check on e1 followed by d6, white's got a wealth of ideas that could just end the game. All right, so knight a5. First important thing to understand is that when you're in the Gambit mindset, to borrow a phrase used in chat, you have to realize that you're not always going to respond to a threat by defending against it straightforwardly. So here, for instance, you wouldn't automatically move the bishop. I think we will make a bishop move, but not because we have to move the bishop. We could also give a check on e1, but then black plays bishop e7. And then if we play d6, black will capture the knight on c4, and at best will only win back one of the pieces. Now, I want to move the bishop. Where should we move it? Well, the move d7, d6 is one way that black can try to consolidate. So let's go bishop b5 in order to prevent d6, to keep this bishop undeveloped and to make it harder for black to untangle. That's very important when you sacrifice a knight like this. a6. There are some interesting ideas here. So bishop a4, he wants b5. Yeah, not so simple here to find a good move. Okay, let's go rook e1 check. Let's throw in the check first. Now let's go d6. Actually, wait a second. No, I know what we're gonna... No, yeah, let's go d6. Let's go d6. We have to. Otherwise, black castles, he takes. And now I need a second to think. Because if we take on e7, then he uses the pawn as an umbrella. But we don't need to rush with d takes e7. We don't need to rush with d takes e7. What we can try to do is distract this knight from g6 so that we can then take on e7 with the rook. And I think that breathes new life into the attack. So I'm going to make a really weird-looking move. Knight h4. In order to attempt to distract the knight away from g6. Now, again, I played very unsoundly here. This is not how I like to play in the speedrun. But, I don't know. I feel like I want to play a couple of tactical games at this level and sort of see how people defend and see how this style works. Why not bishop g5? Well, bishop g5, black just has f7, f6. Okay, knight c6, great. Our opponent is playing great. Now, I actually think that taking on e7, though... No, knight c6 is a phenomenal move. If we take on e7, unfortunately, black can just take. This ain't good, ladies and gentlemen. This is really, really not good. We're out of ideas. Knight f5 castles, amazingly. Okay, let's take. Let's take. We have to win at least one of the pieces back. Yeah, maybe bishop g5. But then f6. Okay, well, let's try it. Let's give it a shot. I have an... Well, no. Everything just doesn't work here. It's crazy. Nothing seems to quite do the trick. I have an idea. But that doesn't work either. This might just be a loss. The way our opponent is defending. Queen h5 castles. I mean, it's like every move there is a simple refutation. Should try this move. I'm not used to somebody defending. I mean, I wasn't expecting our opponent to defend this well, honestly. Okay, that gives us some life. That gives us a little bit of life, but not much. Oh, wait. No. We have a really... Oh, we might be winning. We have a swindle move. So knight d6 check, obviously. Okay, so I jinxed. The Naroditsky jinx strikes again. I just need to compliment people more. Knight d6 check, and after king f8, it's not queen f3. It's not queen f3. That's the mupwa, the most popular wrong answer, because of knight g6 to f4. Blocking the queen's check. And then you might say, well, why not g3 in that position? Remember, we are down 2 pieces. Just winning one of them back is not enough. We need a lot more than that. So the way you want to think about it is thinking in terms of squares. What is the potential mating square? Well, the potential mating square is f7. Is f3 the only pathway? No. There is the alternate pathway queen b3, and that move is so much stronger because black literally cannot put anything in front of the queen. Black's only move is to play queen e8, which, by the way, is not an easy win for white at all, but is definitely winning. Yeah, he 100% legit, obviously, and I just gave him a lot of pieces. He took them, and he found a couple of nice consolidating moves. Yep, there's no defense. I mean, look at this. We're down 2 pieces, but black doesn't have enough activity to muster up a defense against queen f7 that doesn't involve giving up the queen. Yeah, this is like GM luck right here. I was totally out of ideas. Had our opponent castled, we would have been... I'm not saying we would have lost. I think there's a high chance that I would have swindled him, but it was just literally down a piece for no comp. We definitely need to check with an engine because knight g7 I know is wrong. I know black has to play a6, but I'm just not sure exactly what it is that white's supposed to do here. And castling was just sort of a cop-out. Queen e8. Okay, so we can throw in a check on f3, but then there's knight f4. So that's unnecessary. We should just take the queen. And we have basically 2 approaches, I think, to winning this. The first is the direct approach of attacking down the e-file, and we can just double rooks on the e-file. But I don't see a reason for us not to take a couple of pawns while we have the opportunity. While black is still undeveloped, we should build up some insurance by taking the pawns. The other thing we could consider here, yeah, and I think we should take the other one as well. And now we have a little bit more material. We can breathe. Rook f5, and that's a blunder. And this, I've talked about this many times. When one blunder happens, you know, often people are discombobulated, and there's a certain level and experience level at which you stop being quite as discombobulated after blunders, but that we haven't reached that point yet, and black resigns. Wow, what a game. What a crazy game. I apologize for those to you guys watching on YouTube. This was just not good quality chess by me. And I knew it wasn't, but I just wasn't expecting us to run out of ideas so quickly. If I'm honest, I missed knight a5. Like, I saw that this move existed, but I underestimated it tremendously. And I only considered knight ce5. And here I had a really cool idea. So here I had a really cool idea. After knight e5, knight e5, so you guys probably see the move rook e1, and you probably also see that after d6, f4, white wins back the knight. And that's possible, but this isn't amazing because black can go bishop e7. Let's say f takes e5, d takes e5, rook takes e5, and black castles. And at the end of the day, material is equal. And white's king is a little bit flimsy here. So this isn't a very impressive line for white. Who can spot an alternative to rook e1 in the spirit that's more in the spirit of the position? Yeah, now I'm not sure whether this is good or not, but the move I was planning on was d6. Cutting off the bishop, and obviously if knight takes c4, rook e1 check is devastating. Bishop e7, rook e7. I'm sure there's a win here for white somewhere. I mean, bishop g5 looks really good. For starters, creating an x-ray against the queen discovered as mate. It's crushing. You don't want to go queen d5 here. This is a blunder. Who can tell me why? Okay, this is a weird game. Knight takes d6. And how do you see a move like this? Well, I'm pretty obsessed with the notion of contact between pieces. I've talked a lot about undefended pieces on the speedrun. A thing I haven't talked about as much is any situation in which two pieces are making contact. Right? Queen is making contact with the rook. And you might ignore that because the rook is defended by a pawn, but pawns can be captured. And these situations are incredibly dangerous. And I have obviously a lot of examples of that. Why not take with the pawn and win because this doesn't win the queen. The queen has squares along this diagonal. And the pawn serves as an umbrella for the black king, shielding it from everything that can happen to it. Okay, so let's analyze with an engine. All right, so knight g7. Yeah, so apparently the move is... This is an interesting line. I mean, the engine doesn't seem to think that it's that great for white. Knight b5. Oh, this is cool. So one move that I was afraid of is d5. And here, it's important. There's a very tempting idea. ed5, ed5, bishop d5. But this is with the idea knight d5, queen d5. But this is not good because of this intermediate check, bishop b4 check. This is just crappy for white. So the idea is completely different. After d5, you suddenly play bishop f4. I completely missed this move. Just threatening knight c7, and knight c7 can barely be stopped. But wow, what a complicated line. Knight g6, check, king e7. I mean, the depth is very low here. I feel like this has to be good for white somehow. But this needs to be analyzed with a serious stockfish, not with a depth 20 stockfish. You can see how complicated the Smith-Morra is. So d5 is one move. Knight g6 is another move. And here I was not impressed by this. I was not impressed by this because black simply has queen e7. And what has white gained from putting something on d6? Right, I don't really see it. The queen trade is on tap, and black is up a pawn, so the queen trade favors him. Not convincing at all, so this has to be looked at more deeply. Wow. Oh, so the engine actually likes castling here, but again, I wouldn't really trust the engine at anything other than depth like 40 here. No, it does go past depth 20. It's just pretty slow. Okay, so castles. Knight g6. And obviously knight d5 is going to be hated by the engine. Or not. No, it's actually not so bad. And I wonder what the eval is here. Wow, it's actually not bad at all. E d5, E d5. So knight a5 is not the... Well, it is the best according to the engine. And now, apparently, we made a mistake. So the engine line here is rook e1 check bishop d6, knight c4 de, and I stopped calculating here, and I figured that black is fine because the king is totally sheltered, but apparently concretely black is not fine. b3. Okay, so you're attacking the knight. Let's say the knight moves away. Oh, so this is interesting. Even though the pawn is here, the king is not safe because you play knight d4 and you're threatening knight b5, knight d6 with checkmate. The fact that the king is out of squares is very important here, and the king can never castle as long as you keep this pawn alive. So I kind of underestimated white's long-term attacking chances here. That's kind of interesting. Wow. Just cold-bloodedly knight d4, and this pawn will be there forever. And if black ever captures it, I mean, this is completely winning. Bishop a3, and you're just slicing through the position. Yeah, very instructive. So, and if knight takes e7, loose pieces drop off. There's an undefended knight on c4 and a pawn on g7, and you can attack both of them with queen d4. And black has no choice but to give up the knight on c4. Castles, queen c4. And black is still fine. Black is up a pawn, but, you know, it's probably about equal because white's got control of the square in front of the pawn. Huh, very cool. So we played bishop b5, mistake. A6 correct. Now I kind of panicked. Check. Yeah, check exacerbates the issue. Bishop e7. And now it's just bad. The compensation has evaporated. d6 ab, knight h4. Knight h4 is the top move, so I found the best chance. Knight h4 is a really nice move, but here was the critical moment. Oh, our opponent played a really good move, knight c6. That's also fine. de. Knight e7, knight f, bishop g5, and yeah, here, after f6, knight f5, was the key moment, where black simply has to castle. And this just shows you that greed is like, you know, you're up a piece, you know that you're winning by castling, just castle. Even if you don't see the refutation after f takes g5, it's not worth it, right? All you should see is that this gets complicated and your king is still weak. I mean, look at the eval change, that's crazy. So castles and white can resign for all intents and purposes. I mean, we would have to take the knight and drop the bishop back and hope for a miracle. But there's no comp for the extra piece. So my mistake was making an assumption. I've been doing this with my highest rated students recently. We were basically going through and cataloging a lot of positions where it's hard to find the right move because we make a certain assumption about the position. And I divided this into two categories. Position-based assumptions, move-based assumptions and board-based assumptions. And move-based assumptions are situations where you don't consider a move because it falls out of your field of vision. For example, your opponent attacks your queen, and rather than moving your queen, the correct move is to create some stronger threat, but you don't consider it because you only look at moving the queen. Board-based assumptions are assumptions you make about a certain position based on certain cues about the position. So I made a board-based assumption in considering that the pawn on e7 means that white doesn't have an attack, which is untrue. Another type of board-based assumption is thinking that everything is going on the king side, so therefore the correct move also has to happen on the king side, whereas in fact the correct move happens on the queen side. And it's very, very hard to consider those kinds of moves. So you might say, do you have an example of this? I don't understand what you're talking about. I do. Here's a great example of another board-based assumption. And this is the game Pilnik against Karas, which Karas is somebody that most people should be familiar with, one of the strongest player ever to come from Estonia, top 10 in the world, throughout the 50s and 60s. Amazing attacking player. Yeah, there's a good book on his games, Karas Road to the Top. So this position occurs on the board. It's black to play. So what like do you see when you look at this position for a while? Well, you probably, all of our eyes probably gravitate toward the same things. Which is, of course, the queen on h3, and you might also see the knight on e5 and the fact that knight f3 check is almost mating on the spot. But, of course, it's not, because if bishop takes f3, e takes f3, queen takes f3, that doesn't seem to lead anywhere. So we probably all see that. Then you might say, well, what about knight g4? But you'll once again see that there's a bishop there, and the bishop can capture the knight. And you might also be tempted by the move f4, which a lot of my students propose in this position, just because it kind of may look like the right move. But I love to give positions like this, where there's a tempting move and it's just wrong. Because what does this move actually accomplish after queen takes f4? Nothing, right? I mean, black's not getting anywhere. So you might then say, well, what if we try to get rid of the bishop? But you can't get rid of the bishop. The bishop's very safe behind a wall of pawns. So what the heck did Keres do in this position? And this is where avoiding board-based assumptions is important. In your mind's eye, it's so easy to like draw this square and only think within the square. But look at the other side of the board, because you can do something on the queen side that connects to the king side. You have long-range pieces. And some of you are seeing it. The move is b4, brilliant move, with the idea of dislodging not the bishop but the knight with bishop b5 and involving black's bishop in the attack. Now, if white plays bishop e2, then you can already play knight f3. And bishop f3, there's queen takes f1 mate. So white has to play knight d2. But second principle, just because an idea doesn't work in one position doesn't mean it doesn't work in another. You have to keep testing the most tempting moves again and again, because something, without even you realizing, might have changed to make it possible. And so now knight f3 check brilliantly works. Now you might say, I don't understand it. It loses a rook. Well, no. E takes f3. First of all, the rook is defended. Second of all, there's a queen g2 mate threat. And if queen takes f3, there's checkmate on e1. And the same thing happens, by the way, after knight takes f3. It doesn't matter. Rook e1 or queen g2 is mate. So what changed is that the knight moved away from f1, and now there's a bishop on b5. Now, Pilnik, who is a very strong Argentinian player, correctly played c4. And the game goes on. Keres took on c4 and returned to e5. But what black is winning. Bishop b5 is still coming. Knight f3 check is now a threat. And Keres went on to win pretty quickly. If you guys want, I have another example of a board-based assumption. So I was playing a tournament in Holland in 2012. And I was hunting for GM norms at that point. And I played this brilliant game against the GM. Pretty low-rated GM, but still. And after 29 moves, we reached the following position. Great preparation. I mean, it was a dynamite game. So it's white to play in this position, all right? I'm playing white. I've sacrificed the knight, as you can see. Black has 3 minors, white has 2. But just look at the attack on the black king. I mean, boom, 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 boom. Everything is in the attack. And I knew that I had checkmate here somewhere. Now, the move is not a queenside move, by the way. This is not the kind of assumption. But I made a very damaging assumption that stems from the way that my attack is organized. So I was like, okay, well, where is the mate going to come from? And yeah, and I thought, well, the mate's definitely going to be delivered on h7. So what I need to do is I need to cut off the rook from the knight. And what if I play bishop g7? This is checkmate. Well, it's not checkmate yet because of rook takes g7. But how can you prepare bishop g7 check? Yeah, you can play simply e takes f6, which I played very quickly, thinking that there is simply no way to stop bishop g7 check, and then that's going to be mate. But amazingly, black has not only a defense, but after this move, black is winning. Complete swindle. Not rook takes f6. That does not stop bishop g7 because that's a check. And that's it. Does anybody see it? Very good. Monk got it. Queen takes b2 out of nowhere. A move on the queen side to defend against something on the king side. Again, I made the assumption of not looking at the queen side at all because I just didn't see how it would be connected. But after bishop g7 check, x-ray defends. The queen defends g7 through the x-ray, through the control, through the f6 pawn. Rook takes g7. And like magic, the queen appears on g7. There's no more attack. you have to trade the queens because now the rook is hanging with checkmate. And to add insult to injury, the move g4, which may seem to win one of the knights, fails to knight g5, attacking and trapping the rook. So black has 2 pieces for a rook. Black is a winning endgame. And I lost. And had I won this game, I would have very likely gotten a norm. This was round 5. I was having a great tournament. So there is checkmate here instead of this. There is checkmate. But to find this checkmate, you have to dissociate yourself from the idea that the mate has to happen on h7 or on the h file at all. Notice the g8 square. This square is also accessible. If the queen can get there, that's mate. Well, what needs to happen for the queen to get there? Well, you probably need a rook on g3, right? So should we play rook g3? Well, no, because of knight takes g3. And you haven't gained anything by distracting the knight. So can we get rid of the knight? And now you should see this straightforwardly. It's bishop takes f5. ef is forced because the bishop g7 was a threat there. Rook g3, and the game is over. Queen g8 is basically unstoppable. If black moves the bishop, then there's queen takes rook. If black plays knight g5, and this is quite beautiful, you play bishop takes g5, fg, and now you switch back to the h file to give the mate. Now you switch back to the h file to give the mate, which is awesome. I can give you one more, since we're on the topic of like assumptions, and we can turn the speedrun game into sort of a lecture. I'm going to give you one more example before we end, which is an example of a move-based assumption. Which is an example, and a crazy example that I've given only my like highest rated students. So you'll get a taste of what a lesson with a 2350 looks like. You know, like I've gotten a lot of questions about like what do you give like master level students? What kinds of problems do they solve? What does a master level exercise actually look like? Well, I've got a good example for you. So one thing I'll say about like lessons with masters is that when I give exercises, or when I solve exercises, it's not about beauty anymore, or the exercise shouldn't make you want to say, oh, this is cool, although it kind of does. Hopefully that's something that happens, but it's not really about giving the most beautiful position. It's about giving a position that, you know, really helps exercise a certain theme. You're no longer that interested in, you know, looking at something because it's beautiful, because there's a queen sack. You're more interested in targeted improvement. So this is a game between two GMs, not 2022. That's a mistake. It's like 1970s, like 1970 something. Planens was a very interesting player, grandmaster. Langeveg, I think, is still alive. Yeah, he's 85. He's an IM. And it's white to play. So white is sacrificed a piece. And at first sight, it may seem like white has absolutely zero compensation, zero. Right? I mean, white does have a pawn for the piece. Or two pawns, rather. But black's got the queen side attack going. The rook is attacked. This is garbage, right? This looks like garbage for white. A rook takes d6 was proposed, but what does that actually do? Thank you, Carly, for the raid. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. We're finishing up a stream here. This doesn't do anything. Black's king is safe, 94, for instance. And white can resign because you can't even take the knight because of this. It's not rook takes d6. So what the heck does white even do here? How do you even try to generate compensation? Well, there is a very strong move here. And that move, you have to follow the rules, right? Consider the captures and checks first. There are no checks. Now, some of you guys are thinking about f5, but this is way too... This is like trying to kill a dinosaur by, you know, stabbing it with a pencil. It's like, okay, bishop takes d5, queen takes d5. Okay, first of all, you're not attacking the rook on a8 because the queen is defending it. I understand that you want to play g6, but what if black just plays g6? F6, bishop f8. What if, I mean, where are you going from here? You're down a full rook. Remember, just like having a tiny advantage, such as a passed pawn on f6, that doesn't nearly compensate for the rook. But Fisher Seb is suggesting something interesting, which is, what if we take the knight on c5 with a bishop? Well, that's kind of a weird move. First of all, what happens after d takes e5? Well, loose pieces drop off, and also notice the contact between the rook and the bishop. The move rook d7 forks the two bishops. because one of them is attacked twice and only defended once. The other is not defended at all. Okay. Now we're getting somewhere, but there's a problem. And the problem is, in this position, what can black do other than dc5? Well, black can take the rook. Black can take the rook. And as you're calculating this, remember that a master player would do this in their head. And here, the crazy line is, you might spot a further idea with white. How does white even avoid being a rook down? Well, there is a way to avoid being a rook down, and white went for this line. Planens, the grandmaster, missed the correct move and went for that line, which is what? No, it's not rook takes c7. It's not rook takes c7 because of rook takes c7. And again, I think a lot of you are forgetting that the rook on a8 is protected by the queen. It's not knight takes d5 because that allows the queen trade to happen, and then you're down an exchange in an endgame. The only feasible move is queen takes d5. And Planens had calculated that after d takes c5, you can't take on c5 with the queen because you lose the rook on a8 with check. White plays rook takes c7, and guess what? This looks pretty decent for white. White's got a pawn for the exchange. White's got huge pressure on the rook. And after rook 88, your move f5 is very interesting, and it's a complicated game. So this was sort of the first assumption that Planens made, which is a move-based assumption often manifests itself as just not realizing that the opponent has alternatives. Not realizing that the opponent has alternatives. And in this position, it sure looks like black has to take the bishop. What else could black possibly do? And yet, there is a brilliant desperado move here that black played, and that totally changes the landscape of the position. What is it? It's a desperado move. That's a big hint. Yeah, 2 pawns for the exchange. Sorry, Sasha. Rook f4 is illegal. Bishop takes pawn g5. Yes. Boom. Okay. White has to take. Black plays dc. And if you go down the same line, here white has only 1 pawn for the exchange. And most importantly, the f file is wide open, and white doesn't have the idea of going f5 g6. White doesn't have the idea of going f5 g6. And so black is actually much, much better here. And white ended up losing the game, if I'm not mistaken. White ended, 1974, by the way. White lost the game very, very quickly, because what happens here is that black gets queen a6, and white's position collapses. The queen is infiltrating to f1, and you're busted. Planens did his best. King h8, simply moving the king away from the pin, and black hunted down the white king in the end. It's actually a pretty cool finale. Yeah, and white resigned here because he's checkmated and he's down a million pieces. So black won the game. But in addition to assuming that bishop takes g5 does not exist because black has to take on c5, we made an assumption on our end. And this assumption is far more powerful. What assumption did we make in this position? We assume that because we're down a rook, the correct move has to be a capture. Right? We only considered captures because how can you be down a rook and make a move here that's not a capture, right? That just doesn't compute. And yet there's an absolutely incredible resource that not only preserves a playable position, but gives white a pretty big advantage. And it's an incredible move. And I'll give you guys a chance to spot it. But it's genuinely very, very hard. Some of you got it. Very, very close. It's not bishop b4 because then there's simply queen takes b4. But the right idea, the wrong execute. B4 there's en passant. You're forgetting about en passant. We already looked at knight takes d5. It's bishop to b6. I think a couple of you got it. Bishop to b6. Now what the hell's the idea? Well, black has to take. Now you play knight takes d5, forking the queen and the bishop, but there's an obvious flaw, or so it seems in this concept, right? Black can just frickin' go back to b7 and the game is over. But it's not over. It's not over because now you play knight takes e7 check. And after rook e7, You take on e7 and you win the rook in the corner. Queen d5 with a winning queen endgame. And it's crucial that you take with check, otherwise black would have checkmate on e1. So if there was a pawn, black pawn was on h6 instead, king h7 would win here. So obviously black does not have to recapture, black can move the king to the side. But remember that here white has preserved 2 pawns for the exchange, and after the knight returns to d5, white has complete domination in the center, given this incredibly strong knight, and white is actually better. So bishop b6 was missed by white completely, I'm sure, and is missed by the vast majority of people who solve this, because you see bishop c5, if you're, let's say, 2200, you're going to calculate this line pretty quickly, and you're going to think in most cases that this is the solution for white. And you're going to miss bishop takes g5. But if you're like an IM or a GM, then you're probably going to see bishop takes g5, and it's likely that you'll miss bishop b6. But exercises are supposed to be much more challenging than, than real game scenarios, because you have the advantage of knowing that it's an exercise. I don't think there's a book on this. I mean, this is something I definitely want to write about at some point. And this was the zen behind my 3rd book, which is I want to cover 7 or 8 concepts that are very poorly covered in chess literature, and this would be one of them. Like, nobody really talks about assumptions. Like, that's a topic that just doesn't seem well discussed. Sorry, bishop, the correct eval is equal, but black has to be accurate. So you can see with the engine. One moment. And I know this was like super hard, but hopefully you enjoyed like watching the process unfold. You can see that the eval is equal, but after bishop c5, bishop d5, queen d5, bishop takes g5, and black is clearly better / winning. What's up, Hess? Danya book? Yeah, it'll be my first. So bishop b6, queen b6. I mean, basically, queen b7 is the human move. And white is better here. White is a little bit better. Knight e7, queen h8. And actually, white can even take d6. White can even take d6. And I think, practically speaking, white's got great chances here. But yeah, according to the computer, it's essentially equal. In your games, tens of such examples. Yeah, but I mean, I like examples from other games too. Anyways, to return to our game and complete that. So yeah, we were losing. And f takes g5, greed. Greed never pays off in chess. Okay, sometimes it does, but not in this case. King f8, and now the key move was queen b3, missed by our opponent. Not queen f3 check. Again, assumptions. A lot of people would play this move automatically, but the check can be intercepted. And it's very important not to lose sight of the big picture, because I think this is a very common path. And you say, oh, I won the knight, but you're down 2 knights, you're down 2 pieces to begin with. So as I said during the game, don't think of things in absolute terms, like, oh, winning a piece is good, therefore I'm going to do it. When you're down 2 pieces, or you've sacrificed a queen, you got to go for the big prize. You can't just, like, chip away at the material disadvantage. So queen b3 is the move, and queen f7 cannot be defended against. According to the engine, the move g3 was the strongest, which is crazy, threatening queen f3 check and preparing to take this knight after you take the queen. Black's queen cannot get anywhere. I think if I wrote the book, it would sell really, really well. I mean, because you guys are awesome and would probably buy it. Anyways, the game ends because even though black has 3 pieces for the queen, and that technically is enough material, look at how discombobulated black's whole position is. The pin along the e-file is terrible. Our opponent could have been more resilient, but okay, you can't really, I mean, can't really blame them. All right, guys, not the soundest game, but I think it led to a really interesting discussion, so I'm not unhappy. On that note, I'm going to head to bed. Hope you enjoyed the speedrun game. See you guys later. Thank you for hanging out. Thank you for the support. See you tomorrow.